This is a miniature embroidery frame. These were my highest selling products on Etsy. I sold over 11,000 of them. I was the first to sell these on Etsy, and I stopped selling them when too many other people started selling them too. They were just too easy to copy. You gotta know when to hold them and when to fold them. In 2011, I had a dream to have a thriving Etsy store, selling my own unique products. I saw other stay-at-home mums on Instagram with thriving Etsy stores, and every time they posted a drop of products on Instagram, it instantly sold out. On top of this, I had a stretch goal to create products that were so good that they were featured in magazines. I just thought, if I can get my products into magazines, then I will have made it. Having a successful Etsy store was a big dream of mine, and I achieved it, as well as the magazine features. You can achieve your goals too. The only problem is you have to sort the good advice from the bad and outdated advice. In this video, I'll debunk 6 myths about selling on Etsy. They're all things you don't hear much about, but are important to know, especially if you are just starting out. Myth number 1, a successful Etsy store makes $1 million a year. There's a lot of advice out there and videos from people who have made quite a lot of money on Etsy. And I'm sure that would be nice, really nice, but that's not everybody's goal on Etsy. If you want to be a successful seller on Etsy, you first need to decide, what does success look like for you? Is it selling enough to make a full-time income, or is it more of a hobby where you just want to be able to sell the things you make and make a few sales per week? So just ask yourself, what do you need from it and why are you doing it? You also need to decide whether you just want to sell things you've made yourself or whether you're happy to resell other people's mass-made items or craft supplies. This will drive the decisions you make and what advice you listen to about selling on Etsy. So while one person might want to make $80,000 a year, another person might not care and just be happy to sell the things that they deeply enjoy creating. So the truth is, a successful Etsy store turns over however much the seller wants or needs it to. Myth number 2, Etsy is great for selling handmade items. Etsy has changed a lot since it started in 2005. So what some people are saying about Etsy is probably out of date. When I first started selling on Etsy, it was around the same time that Pinterest came out. And it was just a really fun time where creative people were able to come up with new ideas or find ways to make things and sell them on Etsy, or see something on Etsy and go onto Pinterest and find out how to make it. It was just a really fun and creative time, and there was a lot of community around it. Etsy originally set itself up as a sort of online craft fair. It was a completely different world to what it is now, and it was full of artists and people selling amazing vintage items. When Etsy went public in 2013, they also allowed sellers to start selling things that they didn't make themselves, so it could have been anything that is mass-made. The loss of it being an exclusively seller handmade platform has made it extremely competitive. So if you're selling your beautiful handmade items on Etsy, try and make sure that they're really hard to copy, because it's really unlikely that you'll have any kind of copyright or patent or intellectual property about them. And if you hit on something that sells really well, someone else can copy it and have it made in a factory at a scale that you just can't keep up with. And that will break your heart. So the truth is, Etsy can be brutal for people trying to sell their handmade items. Myth number 3 is that the analytics behind Etsy can enable you to see what is selling well so you can sell that same thing too. Etsy Analytics tells you the sales data behind all the stores. If you look at them, you can see what's selling really well across any category. The data can be accessed using one of many third-party plugins that allow you to perform your Etsy sales research. So a lot of people use this data to see what's selling really well, and then they go and sell that too. It becomes a sort of self-fulfilling cycle that doesn't allow or encourage any innovation. Sameness begets more sameness begets more sameness, until everyone is so bored that something new comes along and just blows it all out of the water. I have never sold what Etsy Analytics told me to. In fact, if I am looking at what's selling a lot, it's only to tell me what not to sell. I just think, don't go there, it's already full. Like a really popular holiday destination that everyone's going to, it's at its peak, it's expensive, it's crowded. Wouldn't you rather go on a holiday somewhere that's going to be the next big thing, where There aren't too many people and it's easy to get accommodation and it's beautiful and unspoiled and margaritas aren't really expensive. It's the next big thing that you're looking for. So the truth is, selling products that are already popular on Etsy can be a lot harder than selling products that are going to be popular. Myth number 4, you don't need to do your own promotion as an Etsy seller. Etsy does promotion for you. If you're an Etsy seller and you have a great product that's selling well, you can expect that Etsy will do some kind of search engine optimization and promotion and things that will maximize the searchability of the site so that people can find your product, because it's in their interest for people to buy it too, given that you're paying them seller fees. This is great. This is the benefits of using a marketplace platform like Etsy over something that's more of a standalone website like Shopify or Squarespace. You're paying them fees so they can do some of the hard stuff, like helping you find customers, so you can just focus on your product and your store. But how do you get noticed in the first place in such a saturated marketplace as Etsy? Have a social media account for your store where you post photos of your product. Not just any old photos, but photos of it being used, photos that make it look attractive and show what it is and what the benefits are. This will help drive your first few sales on Etsy and give you some momentum. So the truth is, you do need to do some of your own promotion outside of Etsy, even just a little bit. Myth number 5, Etsy will bring you more customers than a standalone website from somewhere like Shopify or Squarespace. Another reason why you might want to promote your store and your product and interact with customers outside of Etsy is that Etsy basically owns your customers. What I mean is, when a customer buys from you on Etsy, you don't get their phone number or their email address. So if your shop is growing and you want to expand it out of Etsy and onto a standalone platform, it is really hard and messy to let all your customers know where you're going and what you're doing. You'll kind of realize that you've been working for Etsy all along, rather than yourself. Any online business owner knows that their email list is one of the most important parts of their business. On Etsy, you can't email your customers a weekly newsletter or anything like that. You can only message them individually via the platform. So if you want to move off Etsy to expand your store, unless some of those people are following you on social media, you can't let them know easily. So the truth is, Etsy makes it easy to get the sale, but not the customers. Okay, myth number 6. You have to stick with it to get sales on Etsy. There's a lot of advice around about business and branding that has endured over decades that these days seems to be losing relevance. These are things like, have a really strong defined brand, do one thing and do it well, stick with it. In the online selling world, especially if you are a sole trader, advice like this is not helpful. The customers on Etsy are more fickle than they used to be. It used to be a place that was very community driven and you would kind of get to know each other and your customers a little bit. Now customers are more about getting in, buying and getting out. Where it once made sense to focus on building a brand, a shop and a product that endured through the ages, you now have to know when to hold them and when to fold them as far as your products are concerned. The online selling world is a fast-moving world and you can't get too attached to your product. Be ready to pivot and change. There's no intellectual property in most of what people sell on Etsy. So when something really popular comes along, everyone gets on board and just does it to death. I know it sounds really brutal, but that's just how it is right now, although it may not always be that way. Think in terms of your shop, not necessarily your product. Your shop can basically sit there for free, unlike in the real world, and you can come and go to it over the years when you have something new that you'd like to sell. For that reason, you should think about keeping your branding fairly broad. So if you have an Etsy store selling baby clothes, rather than calling it Barb's Baby Clothes, you might call it Barb's Emporium or something more broad that allows you to pivot and change and grow and take new opportunities for new products when you see them. The enduring aspect of the brand is you, not necessarily the product. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe if you haven't already. You gotta know when to hold 'em, know when to fold 'em, know when to walk away.